All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a pretty wild story that's been all over the internet. It's about this supposed U.S. military operation to snatch the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. We're going to really unpack how this whole story, this narrative, was put together.
And right off the bat, you get this quote, Nicolas Maduro fucked around and he found out. I mean, wow. This isn't just some casual comment, right? This sets the entire tone. It immediately frames the whole thing as, well, as payback. It's cause and effect, plain and simple. He did something, and this is the consequence.
Okay, so to really get how this story is put together, we're going to look at it in 5 parts. First, the raid itself. Then, how it's justified. After that, the reactions, the cheering and the condemning. Then, the supposed plan for Venezuela's future. And finally, what kind of message this is all meant to send to the rest of the world.
All right, let's kick things off with the heart of the story, the raid. And according to the sources we're looking at, this wasn't just some messy operation. Oh no, they paint it as this perfectly executed, almost cinematic military event.
So the story goes that an elite Delta Force team just slipped into Venezuela, totally in the dark. The narrative really hammers home the skill and the insane precision of the American forces. It's constantly described as a remarkable intelligence and military success. You know, the kind of thing they say no other country on the planet could even dream of pulling off. And look at the level of detail they provide. It's laid out like a Tom Clancy novel. Step 1. Create chaos with some diversionary strikes on, say, an airport. Step 2. While everyone's distracted, Delta Force sneaks into Maduro's compound, completely unnoticed. Step 3. They grab Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, literally seconds before they can get to a steel safe room. And Step 4. Whisk them away to the USS Iwo Jima, a warship waiting just offshore. It's this incredibly complex plan that, in the story, goes off without a single hitch.
And here's a really crucial piece of this flawless narrative puzzle. 0. That's the number of American casualties they claim. This point gets brought up again and again, and it's there for a reason, to drive home this idea of total American military dominance and surgical precision.
Okay, so you've got this dramatic, flawless raid. But why? How do the sources even begin to justify an action this huge? This is where the story takes a really interesting turn. It's framed less like an act of war and more like, well, like serving an arrest warrant.
Yeah, exactly. The whole narrative is built around this idea that Maduro wasn't targeted as a president, but as a fugitive. This wasn't war. It was law enforcement on a global scale. And the justification for this arrest? It's all based on these pre-existing criminal indictments from the Southern District of New York. We're talking narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation, possession of machine guns. The list goes on. See, they're not painting him as a head of state. They're painting him as the kingpin of a massive narco-terrorist organization that's actively hurting the U.S.
And they have a name for this organization, the Cartel de los Soles, or the Cartel of the Suns. This term is used over and over. It's a way to brand the entire Venezuelan government not as a political body, but as one big criminal enterprise.
And this is where the story really broadens out. It's not just about Maduro anymore. The operation gets tied directly to problems inside the United States, stopping the flow of drugs, gang members, and what they call criminal aliens. So the whole thing is presented as an act of self-defense, protecting America's own borders and its own people.
So, the raid happens. How does the world react? Well, according to these sources, there are only 2 reactions. You have the heroes who get it, and the villains who just don't. It's a world of black and white.
And this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the Venezuelan people. The sources are filled with clips of them supposedly cheering in the streets, popping champagne, crying tears of joy, and thanking President Trump. Total liberation. And on the other side, the woke media. They're portrayed as having an absolute meltdown, defending dictators, and being totally clueless. It's a classic us versus them setup, right? The media are the out-of-touch elites, and the people on the street know the real story.
And this quote really sums up that whole mindset. The lamestream media has no idea how the world works. This is central to the entire narrative. It tells the audience, hey, you can't trust them, but you can trust us. We're giving you the real story, the one the mainstream is either too biased or too stupid to see.
Okay, so Maduro was captured. What's next? Well, according to these sources, the capture is just the beginning. They lay out a whole plan for the future of Venezuela, a plan that involves a lot of direct American involvement.
The story goes that the U.S. is going to step in and run Venezuela for a while. Now, they're careful not to call it an occupation. No, it's a temporary stewardship, just to make sure there's a safe, proper, and judicious transition.
One commentator even quotes President Trump as saying, flat out, we're going to run the country.
And it's a pretty detailed plan. First, rebuild the oil infrastructure. That's key. Then, use the money from that oil to pay back the U.S. for its trouble and fund the new government. They also make it clear that a pro-U.S. leader has to take over, not Maduro's number two. And all this is supposed to spark a popular uprising that brings back democracy.
All right, last part. This whole operation, as it's told, isn't just about Venezuela. It's bigger than that. It's designed to be a massive global message to anyone who might think about crossing the United States.
And this quote from Pete Hegseth just says it all. Our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. I mean, that's the bottom line right there. The sources are pushing this as a huge comeback for American strength on the world stage.
And they name names. They say this is a direct warning to countries like Iran, China, Russia, Colombia, and Cuba. The commentators suggest that leaders in those places should be deeply concerned because this proves that if you get on America's bad side, you could be next. So, when we pull back and look at this whole narrative, it's not really about whether the raid happened or not. It's about understanding how powerful these stories can be in our digital world, and it leaves us with this big question to think about. How do these kinds of narratives about military power actually shape the way we see the world and America's place in it? Thanks for watching.